At the very edge of the world, where temperatures can drop below -40 degrees Celsius, that is about -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and where the northern winds howl like blades slicing through layers of ice several meters thick, the Arctic has always remained a land of mysteries yet to be unraveled by humankind. But beneath that frozen crust, and within the dark, silent depths of the ocean, a quiet invasion is taking place. No gunfire, no bloodshed, no battle lines. Only millions of massive creatures with 8 legs and 2 claws like steel pincers, slowly advancing mile by mile through the freezing seas, expanding their territory day by day. They come from Kamchatka, a remote volcanic land of Russia where fire and ice coexist. From that land, a red storm, known as the giant red king crab, began its journey across thousands of kilometers, or about thousands of miles, of open ocean, moving toward the northern European seas, once the kingdom of cod, herring, and cold water corals. Today, when northern fishermen cast their nets, they no longer pull up just fish. They haul up massive crimson claws as large as a human arm, each weighing several kilograms, which is about several pounds. An invasive species is shaking both the ecosystem and the economy of the Arctic Ocean. According to marine research institutes, the damage has already surpassed 100 million euros every year, and that number shows no sign of slowing down. The ocean floor is changing. Native species are vanishing. Ecosystems are being turned upside down. And it all began with human hands. In today's video, join me as we explore the icy Arctic Ocean, where giant red king crabs are quietly spreading, seizing the territory of native species, and forcing scientists to ask one chilling question. Are we, perhaps unknowingly, creating a red empire beneath our very own ice? In the 1960s, during the peak of the Soviet Union's industrialization era, many marine scientists began exploring ways to harness the potential of the northern seas. At that time, the Barents Sea and the Norwegian Sea were still largely untouched, with very little fishing activity, sparse populations, and harsh weather conditions that made catching seafood extremely difficult. It was in that context that an experimental project was launched at the Murmansk Institute of Oceanographic Research. The goal of this project was to increase marine biomass production in the polar regions by transferring certain high-value species from the Pacific Ocean to the northern seas. Among the many candidates considered, the Kamchatka red king crab, Paralithodes kamchaticus, was chosen for its ideal biological traits. This is a giant crab species that can reach a leg span of nearly 6 feet, which is about 1.8 meters, and weigh more than 22 pounds, or about 10 kilograms. These crabs are exceptionally resilient. They can survive in water temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 0 degrees Celsius, travel long distances, quickly adapt to new environments, and feed on almost anything, from algae and small crustaceans to the carcasses of marine animals. In the early phase of the experiment, several hundred adult crabs were collected from the waters off Kamchatka, in eastern Russia. Scientists used special cold water tanks designed to replicate their natural habitat, allowing the crabs to survive the long journey of more than 1,200 miles, or about 2,000 kilometers. The voyage lasted for several weeks, crossing the Arctic Sea route from the Pacific Ocean to the Barents Sea. By the early 1970s, the Soviet Union officially released the first groups of crabs into the waters near the Kola Peninsula. The project was initially seen as a success. The crabs thrived, grew rapidly, and reproduced efficiently. The authorities at the time hailed it as a new marine resource that could help secure food supplies for the Arctic region, while also supporting military bases and permanent research stations in the far north. However, just a few years later, scientists began noticing troubling signs. The red king crabs were not only surviving but multiplying far beyond expectations. They faced virtually no natural predators, since the Barents Sea ecosystem had no species strong enough to prey on adult crabs. Moreover, their omnivorous diet allowed them to consume nearly everything, from plankton and bottom-dwelling creatures to fish eggs and cold-water corals. Their reproduction rate also played a major role. A single female can produce up to 200,000 eggs per season, and the larvae have a much higher survival rate than local species. In the stable cold waters, free from major predators, they grew quickly, matured early, and began forming massive swarms that migrated along the Norwegian coast. By the late 1980s, the distribution range of the red king crab had expanded hundreds of miles westward, moving beyond Russian waters and invading the Norwegian Sea. The ecological consequences soon became evident. The seabed was transformed, and populations of small crustaceans, starfish, and native mollusks sharply declined. Scientists recorded a dramatic loss of biodiversity along the coastal zones. What was once celebrated as a biological achievement had now become a textbook example of human miscalculation in manipulating nature's balance. From an economic and social experiment, the Kamchatka red king crab had evolved into one of the most aggressive invasive species in the Arctic Ocean, a creature that reshaped not only the environment, but also the fishing industries of Norway and other northern European nations. When scientists began to realize the extent of the Kamchatka red king crab's expansion, much of the northern marine ecosystem had already started to change. The first groups of crabs were observed migrating from the waters off Murmansk westward along the Norwegian coastline. They advanced steadily, moving across underwater mountain ridges at depths ranging from about 650 to 1,300 feet, which is roughly 200 to 400 meters, where the water temperature remains stable between 32 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 0 to 4 degrees Celsius. These were perfect conditions for their growth. Researchers at the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research reported that in just over 2 decades, the distribution range of the red king crab had expanded more than 600 miles westward, or about 1,000 kilometers, reaching the waters of Svalbard. And there were even occasional reports of sightings as far south as Scotland and the United Kingdom. This rate of expansion was described as unprecedented in the recorded history of crustacean migration. The red king crab's biological structure allows it to adapt almost perfectly to cold water environments. Each female can produce between 150,000 and 300,000 eggs per season, and the eggs are protected by thick shells that can withstand freezing temperatures for months. When the eggs hatch, the larvae drift freely in the water for 2 to 3 months, carried by cold ocean currents from east to west, forming dispersed clusters that stretch for hundreds of miles. During this process, many young crabs survive and settle in new areas, especially along continental shelves rich in algae and bottom-dwelling organisms. Unlike native species, which reproduce slowly and depend heavily on seasonal conditions, the red king crab can breed consistently every year. They are not picky eaters. Algae, small crustaceans, starfish, fish eggs, mollusks, and even decomposing organic matter all make up their diet. This allows them to quickly take over food sources that once supported other species. Areas that were once vibrant ecosystems, such as the Varanger Fjord and the Finnmark region of Norway, began showing clear signs of ecological collapse. Scientists recorded sharp declines in populations of marine worms, mollusks, soft corals, and seagrass, organisms that form the nutritional foundation for dozens of small fish species. As the seabed was devastated, the upper layers of the food chain were also disrupted. Cod, herring, and other predatory fish were forced to move farther offshore in search of food. Seafloor surveys using sonar and remotely operated underwater robots revealed a disturbing reality. Vast areas, stretching for tens of square kilometers, were left barren, covered only with sand, gravel, and empty crab shells. Cold-water coral reefs, which take centuries to form, were broken apart by the crab's movement and feeding. The seabed structure had been reshaped, and safe habitats for young marine life had nearly disappeared. For local fishermen, these changes were more visible than ever. They said that within just a few years, fish stocks dropped dramatically while the number of crabs in their nets skyrocketed. When we cast our nets, we pull up nothing but crabs. The fish are gone. It is like the seafloor has been swept clean, said a fisherman from Tromsø during a 2015 survey. This situation sparked heated debates among scientists, government officials, and the fishing industry. On one hand, the red king crab became a valuable economic resource, bringing in significant income through exports. On the other hand, their overwhelming presence was transforming the entire ecological structure of the North Atlantic. By the early 2000s, studies in Norway showed that the average crab density had reached 20 to 30 individuals per 100 square meters of seafloor, a level dozens of times higher than the natural ecological balance. When their numbers became too large, they not only destroyed bottom-dwelling life, but also began competing with one another, leaving many areas depleted and stripped of natural food sources. As a result, a sea once full of diversity and life had been transformed. The reddish-brown hue of crab shells gradually replaced the natural green of algae and seagrass. The ocean floor became barren, and the traditional food chain of the region was broken at its very base, the foundation that once supported the entire Arctic ecosystem. The Barents Sea, located in the far north of Europe, is one of the coldest and most unforgiving oceans on Earth. Air temperatures often range from -4 degrees Fahrenheit to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about -20 to -40 degrees Celsius, and winter winds can reach speeds of up to 93 miles per hour, or about 150 kilometers per hour. Waves can rise higher than 33 feet, or about 10 meters, powerful enough to tilt a steel ship weighing hundreds of tons. On the surface, seawater can freeze within minutes as icy winds sweep across, forming a thin crust of ice that coats the ship's deck. This is the daily working environment of the red king crab fishermen. This line of work began to grow rapidly in the early 2000s, when Norway legalized the harvesting of red king crabs in certain regions. The goal was twofold: to control the spread of the species while turning it into an economic resource. Modern fishing vessels were specially designed for polar operations, with reinforced hulls and industrial heating systems to prevent ice buildup. Yet no matter how well equipped they are, working in the Barents Sea remains among the most dangerous occupations in the world. Fishermen wear multiple layers of insulated clothing, thick flotation suits, rubber gloves resistant to freezing, and helmets covering their entire heads. Once at sea, they work continuously under harsh conditions: little sleep, freezing winds hitting their faces, and slippery decks covered in ice. Each steel crab trap weighs between 88 and 110 pounds, or about 40 to 50 kilograms. The traps are large cylindrical cages dropped to the seafloor at depths of around 800 to 1,100 feet, which is about 250 to 350 meters. Inside each trap, bait, usually herring or cod, is placed to lure the crabs in. When it is time to haul the traps back up, that is the most dangerous moment. The hydraulic winches can lift traps weighing several hundred kilograms out of the freezing water. Just one small mistake, a rope catching on someone's leg or arm, can drag a person overboard into near freezing water just a few degrees above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 0 degrees Celsius. In such conditions, survival time is no more than a few minutes without immediate rescue. Numerous accidents are reported every year, especially during winter storms when visibility drops to nearly zero. Beneath the surface lies an entirely different world. At those depths, sunlight cannot penetrate. The red king crabs move slowly across the muddy seabed in large herds. Each one can reach a leg span of nearly 6.5 feet, or about 2 meters, and weigh between 13 and 22 pounds, or about 6 to 10 kilograms. When the traps touch the seafloor, dozens of crabs crawl in, gripping the bait tightly with their massive claws, trapping themselves until they are hauled up. Every time the winch roars to life, the sound echoes throughout the ship. The traps are pulled from depths of more than 980 feet, or about 300 meters. As they emerge, melting ice turns into a mist that drifts across the deck. When the nets are opened, the crimson crabs tumble onto the floor, their legs and claws clattering against each other in a sound fishermen instantly recognize. Each crab is carefully inspected. Only mature males of legal size are kept, while females carrying eggs and smaller crabs are released back into the sea to preserve the breeding population. On board, the work never stops. The fishermen sort the crabs, rinse them in cold seawater, and store them in chilled compartments kept at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 0 degrees Celsius, to maintain freshness. A single workday can last 16 to 18 hours, depending on weather and catch size. Some expeditions stretch up to 3 weeks, hundreds of miles away from land, far beyond the reach of phone signals, with nothing but the ship as their only refuge. Despite the hardship and danger, red king crab fishing brings in high income. A single adult crab can sell for several hundred US on the international market. Yet to earn that reward, fishermen must risk their health and their lives. According to Norway's maritime authorities, the accident rate in the red king crab fishery is 4 times higher than in traditional fishing. This work is not only a means of livelihood, but also part of an ecological management strategy, a way for humans to control the spread of a species they themselves once introduced to these northern waters. On the icy ocean, every turn of the winch and every heavy trap lifted from the depths is not just the product of labor, but a reminder that the silent struggle between humankind and nature continues. Among the cold winds, frozen seas, and the creatures that once reshaped the entire Arctic ecosystem. After weeks spent at sea in the icy waters of the Barents Sea, tons of crimson crabs are finally unloaded from the ship's storage hold. The air at the harbor is thick with mist rising from containers packed with crushed ice. The sound of roaring engines, clanging steel, and the northern wind whistling through rows of shipping containers create a scene unique to the Arctic fishing ports. The crabs are moved along conveyor belts batch by batch. Workers wearing thick protective suits and rubber gloves carefully sort each crab by size and weight. Those that meet export standards are sent through automated seawater washing systems to remove sand, mud, and any residue clinging to their shells. After washing, the crabs are rapidly chilled to maintain freshness before entering the processing line. Some are separated into legs, while others are lightly boiled in brine at precisely controlled temperatures to keep the meat firm while preserving its natural sweetness. Immediately afterward, all are deep frozen at -40°C, or about -40°F, using individual quick freezing technology, a method that prevents the formation of large ice crystals which can damage the delicate meat texture. Once frozen, the crabs are transferred to the packaging area. There, each one is vacuum sealed in multi-layer bags to prevent any air or moisture from entering. Every shipment carries a traceability code detailing the exact catch coordinates, fishing date, and vessel information. From ports in Norway, Russia, or the Tromsø region, containers filled with red king crabs are transported by refrigerated ships or aircraft to global distribution hubs, from Tokyo and Seoul to New York. Throughout this supply chain, every step is closely monitored to meet international food safety standards, such as HACCP and ISO 22000. Ironically, the species once considered an invasive threat to the North Atlantic ecosystem has now become a major source of economic profit. The crabs are served in high-end restaurants, where chefs prepare them with meticulous care, turning each dish into a delicacy that can cost hundreds of dollars per serving. Under the warm, golden lights of fine dining halls, presented beautifully on porcelain plates, few diners ever stop to think that behind those hard crimson shells lies a symbol of nature's ongoing transformation, one that continues far away beneath the frozen waves of the Arctic Ocean. After realizing that completely eradicating the red king crab was nearly impossible, the Norwegian government changed its approach. Instead of fighting against the species, they decided to manage it through commercial harvesting. New regulations allowed fishing all year round, and many private companies quickly entered the industry. Modern fishing vessels were soon equipped with GPS navigation systems, seafloor scanning sonar, and radar capable of detecting crab swarms with high precision. Large onboard refrigeration units helped preserve the catch immediately after hauling, reducing spoilage and increasing economic value. At first, this seemed like a smart biological strategy, one that could both utilize a natural resource and help control the population of this invasive species. However, as the market price of red king crabs soared, from just a few dozen dollars to more than $100 per kilogram, or about $45 per pound, the original intention began to shift. Fishermen and companies no longer saw it as a form of biological management, but as a lucrative opportunity. The fishing zones expanded rapidly beyond the permitted areas, spilling into the shared waters between Norway and Russia, sparking disputes over both resource rights and environmental impact. The intense level of harvesting placed enormous pressure on the seafloor environment. Native species such as starfish, sea snails, and mollusks declined sharply, either caught accidentally in the traps or displaced from their natural habitats. Yet, ironically, this very commercial activity helped the red king crab adapt and spread even faster. Smaller crabs that slipped through the nets or were released back into the sea continued to migrate, expanding their breeding grounds across the North Atlantic. What began as a well-intentioned biological control program gradually turned into a race for profit, a red-gold rush, where the line between conservation and exploitation became increasingly blurred. The Arctic Ocean remains cold. The northern winds still howl across sheets of ice thick as steel, and beneath them, in the darkness where sunlight never reaches, a crimson world continues to move in silence. The giant king crab, a creature once brought here by humans as an experiment, has now become the clearest reminder of a profound biological truth. Nature never accepts control. Humankind once believed it was wise enough to order the oceans, but a single mistake, the release of just a few hundred crabs into the Barents Sea, created a biological empire stretching thousands of kilometers, shattering a balance that took nature millions of years to build. As the ice melts, as the waves rise, the clicking of claws still echoes in the deep, like the heartbeat of a silent red empire, a reminder that the ocean has never truly belonged to us. If you've followed me this far, take a second to hit subscribe and like so we can continue uncovering the hidden mysteries of the sea, where every creature, no matter how small, has the power to alter the balance of life on Earth. In the next episode, we'll dive even deeper into a world ruled by a species seemingly fragile, yet far more destructive than the king crab, a creature almost invisible, but spreading its dominion across every ocean on the planet. Can you guess what it is? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because our journey to understand the natural world has only just begun.